Cleopatra loses Netflix $2 billion in Egypt lawsuit?
So just a few months ago, Netflix put out a quote-unquote documentary on Cleopatra where they made her look like this.
What?
And the reaction to that quote-unquote documentary was horrible to say the
Doesn't seem like it did too well. I wonder why. A Netflix adaptation, a documentary, shouldn't be too hard to do. There's probably quite a lot of scientific facts out there and knowledge that's already been put down in history books. You can find a lot of information to get an accurate representation of what Queen Cleopatra from Egypt was like.
least.
Well, she wasn't from, which she stayed in Egypt. Before we get into it, she stayed in Egypt, but she came from Greece and all that, I believe. Yeah.
Among those angry was the entire country of Egypt, where many of those people came out voicing how they were annoyed that America was putting their own spin on their own history and trying to lecture Egypt about their very own cultural history that—
Whoa. This is something America would never do, is import their culture and their history and their issues into other countries. That never happens.
they are so proud of. And that has resulted in the entire country of Egypt suing Netflix for the huge sum of $2 billion.
There's no way they're going to get away with that, though, is there? $2 billion.
Are you serious?
And following them coming out with that lawsuit, the main actress from this quote-unquote documentary responded to Egypt's backlash with this.
I think it's quite funny. The level of
Don't
threat
do it.
that you must feel just on my skin tone to file a lawsuit against an entire streaming service.
Don't do it.
That to me is really extreme. It's a really extreme reaction, and it's 100% fundamentally rooted in racism, which is a very modern ideology.
She did it. The first mistake she made was talking about it at all. And there we go. It came out.
You're crazy!
But what I think she fails to realize, and why I think Egypt actually has a very strong chance in this lawsuit of maybe not winning an entire $2 billion,
Yeah, they probably won't get $2 billion.
but winning a very huge amount of money, is because Netflix called this a documentary, and they made a bunch of wild accusations and wild claims that they weren't really able to back up with any more evidence than just this.
Skin color.
I remember my grandmother saying to me, I don't care what they tell you in school, Cleopatra was black.
I've seen some of these videos talking about Cleopatra. I've never seen the Cleopatra series on Netflix, and I was tempted to see it just to sort of see how bad it was. But yeah, that's actually used in the documentary, by the way. That wasn't just like a meme.
Are you serious right now, bro?
And when you make those amount of claims, and that bold of a claim about an entire country's history in a series that you called a documentary, you're then liable for spreading false information and for lying about an entire country. And those are the grounds that the country of Egypt are taking Netflix to court. And with this being such a huge court case, with this being such a huge law—
Wait. We were talking about Snow White the other day. She looks like the witch, potentially, doesn't she?
lawsuit, Netflix are going to have to spend a lot of money on their lawyers and a lot of money on this lawsuit in general. And so if they end up losing and having to pay hundreds of millions or even over $1 billion, they might end up losing even more than the $2 billion lawsuit. So even if they don't have to pay $2 billion, they may end up having to pay a lot more money than that because of the amount of money they lost on the series itself, the amount of money they will have to...
It doesn't seem like it's shot like a documentary, though. Like, I'm sure they've got some sort of clause to sort of make out as if it's like a mockumentary almost, or, you know, it's not a scientific documentary. It's a liberal, loose use of the word documentary or something, because the video footage that's being shown looks like it's more of a kind of a drama romance series. instead of like the nature of what would seem like a documentary.
Spend on lawyers and the amount of money that they'll end up having to pay in this lawsuit that many believe they're inevitably going to lose. But not only that, throughout the entire documentary series, they rarely focused on anyone from Egypt. A lot of the focus was put on
I wonder
American
why.
historians who looked like they weren't even older than 40 years old and had just graduated from college. And when you're making this big of a
Yeah, but hang on a second. Look at the suit he's wearing. He looks smart. Is that not good enough to pass the test?
40 years old and had just graduated from college. And when you're making this big of a claim against an entire country, it just comes across as beyond arrogant to not include anyone from the very country that you're talking about. And not only that, but Netflix were trying to profit off this documentary. Netflix thought this was
Does there anyone genuinely at Netflix that thinks it's a good idea? Aren't they just always trying to promote a specific message? They must know by this point that it's not a good idea to do this sort of thing, but they just go ahead and do it anyway.
going to be a huge hit, and they were trying to make money off the history of
They don't care. It's like a level of arrogance almost. It's not like this is what we think would be good for our audience base. It's just like, this is what I want to do. I'm putting it out there. I don't care.
Egypt without including any Egyptians throughout the series. Now, I won't lie, I only watched the first episode of this series because I couldn't watch beyond that. It was that terrible. However, throughout the entire first episode, I don't think I heard from an actual Egyptian. I don't think they even interviewed an Egyptian throughout the entire first episode, or anyone who had dedicated their life purely to Egyptian history.
Why would you? It's about Egypt.
And not only that, but they don't even talk about the actual evidence that they have about Cleopatra. They don't even show the real sculptures that were made.
Yeah, now that's a fair enough point. If it's a documentary, the least you can do is show the actual science. Well, I keep saying scientific facts and stuff like that. Just the grounded, rooted reality of what we currently have documented
Of her at the time that she was alive, which clearly show her with Greek features. Gotcha, bitch! And that backs up the claim that Egyptians have said about her coming from Greece and not being a native Egyptian, but coming from Greece and becoming the Queen of Egypt. So yes, she was the Queen of Egypt, but she wasn't a native Egyptian, and that is what Egyptian people have been saying about their...
It's kind of like how royalty from England is actually German, I think. If you probably trace it back far enough.
Own history, yet Netflix made this claim that she was black without addressing the very real evidence that Egypt has to back up the Greek heritage. And this whole disaster was an absolute new low for Hollywood, but it leads to an even deeper question, which is why Hollywood must put a political marketing spin on every single project.
It's no longer 1937.
Because politics definitely has a place in art, and art should reflect politics, and there are times that it should have a political spin. However, it shouldn't be on every single project. And on top of that, why is it now impossible to market a movie or a show with the quality of the show rather than the politics?
I feel like...
Well, that's just the day and age we live at. You live in. Just look at Twitter. It's just like everything has to have an agenda now, or at least it almost seems that way. Even stuff that doesn't have an agenda. Like I say, I start looking at movies these days, and I can't tell whether they put certain things in because there was an agenda. You start second guessing everything that's being put in front of you.
Star Wars is very like patriarchal, so
because it seems like nowadays they hardly ever talk about the quality of the series. With so many shows coming out from various production companies, they talk about the diversity, they talk about the gender politics, they talk about whatever political spin they may have, and that's all fine and good, but you hardly ever hear them talk about what makes the show good, why the series is actually quality.
Because that would mean creating substance and giving it a purpose, and therefore making a good product that you can enjoy, because there'll be depth to it that you can understand to whatever degree you're capable of, and you can think about it, ponder upon it, and realize, yeah, that program made me think. Or it could just be completely flat and obvious and have no substance behind it whatsoever, and therefore be disappointed. Which one are they going to go for? The one that actually requires effort or the one that's just easy?
And why people should give up their own hard-earned money to watch a movie or watch a show that is actually good. And why we know this has gotten really bad is for the simple fact that it is now bled into
It just makes me think of The Witcher, actually, when it thinks about that. Like, the level of how quality, level of quality that The Witcher could have been as to what we actually ended up getting. That's what I would actually think of when I think of Netflix in a lot of ways.
Documentaries. If a documentary now is more about a political spin rather than unbiased truth, then we know this is a serious problem in Hollywood, and we know that this has to be addressed.
Just stop this, please.
But what's hilarious about all of these political spins that they use to market a series or a show or a so-called documentary is that most audience members are happy to watch a show or film just because it's good. They're fine to sit down and watch a movie or a show regardless of the race of the actors, just as long as the actual story is good. And
yeah, that's what you just said there, Saren. No one would care about the race makeup of the cast if the shows had well-written characters to begin with. Exactly. Who gives a fucking shit? Just make a good program, and then we can all enjoy it.
That is no more evident than the simple fact that Crazy Rich Asians could be a global hit. Black Panther can make over $1 billion. Across the Spider-Verse can also be an absolute box office hit, and the reason that they are hits are because the story is good. So majority audience members out there, majority people out there are fine to sit down and watch a movie that is diverse just as long as the story is.
I'm really worried about the second one of this. I really enjoyed the Spider-Man, it's Into the Metaverse or whatever the hell it was called. I really enjoyed that first one, but I'm not sure they're now going to like pop off and start to go a bit crazy on the second one and sort of forget what made the first one good.
Good. And nowadays we have this great opportunity in Hollywood to build a truly diverse industry where we tell great stories from different cultures just as long as the actual story is good. You don't need to market a story based on the politics of it. You don't need to use a diversity spin in order to market a project to the audience. They're fine to sit down and watch a diverse movie. They just want to make sure it's good. So why don't these studios focus on marketing their movies through the quality of what they're talking about? Talk about why this show is good. Talk about why this series is of such a high quality.
Because it's not the message, is it? That's why. They're just very linear and flat-minded, I would say. There's not much sort of like going on behind there. They just have this one thing that they just want to bring up, this one agenda, and that's all that matters. It doesn't matter like how they got to this stage, why the character is the way they were, what sort of upbringing did they have, like what interactions with friends, family, enemies made them the person that they are. Who was Cleopatra? What made her who she is? How did she become the Queen of Egypt? No, that's not really relevant.
What makes this series different, what makes this series great as a story, and people are going to be fine to watch it as long as you focus on story. But when you try and market it politically, it makes people feel like you don't actually have a good story because you're clearly relying on different political pandering in order to make money for the show and not relying on the actual quality of it. Because
Snow White's Rachel Segler officially fired by studio. I still don't know if she really is officially fired. I just think she's been blacklisted now at this point. So yeah, maybe she's no longer on the project. It's a bit of a weird one, that one.
Like I said, Crazy Rich Asians is an incredible film, and that's why it made a lot of money. Black Panther is an incredible film, and that's why it made a lot of money. So we can build a great diverse industry, and we're definitely on the way there. However,
I wouldn't say Black Panther was an incredible film. I think there was really good moments in it and good elements in it, but if you think about the movie too much, you're going to have a bad time. But if you sort of turn your brain off, then you can definitely enjoy it. It was an enjoyable movie, no doubt about it. Great villain.
story has to come first because you're in the storytelling business. And when it comes to documentaries, truth and unbiased opinion has to come first as well. And clearly, this idea of trying to pander politically doesn't work with audience members, which is evident through the audience reviews for.
You know, it's bad when on Rotten Tomatoes, even the professional reviewers give it a bad score, and I don't trust this website. I have never trusted Rotten Tomatoes. I always thought it was super scuffed out. Every single time I would look at a movie that I actually enjoyed and that the audience enjoyed, and then the Rotten Tomatoes reviewer would give it a low score, and then everything else that I thought was completely shite, they'd be like, wow, this is the best thing ever. And the audience scores would be 30 to 50% or something at best. It's just come on. It's just it's worse than IGN sort of levels of being paid off. It's this garbage game, and they'll give it an 8 out of 10.
Cleopatra. This is one of the worst review shows of all time, if not the worst review show. I don't think it even got above 10% with the reviews on Rotten Tomatoes, and that's coming from the audience who they were trying to pander to. That's coming from the audience that they thought would eat up this diverse pandering.
I don't know necessarily about that. I reckon Netflix obviously have their agenda, but isn't the person who created Queen Cleopatra, or the TV series on documentary, whatever the hell you want to call it, Jada Pinkett Smith, who, as we know, is a vile, nasty piece of work, allegedly. So I don't think this was so much necessarily Netflix being we want to push this agenda. I think Netflix were on board with it, but I reckon Jada Pinkett Smith was full on board, sort of making sure that this was inaccurate as possible, as long as it agreed with what she wanted to push as a message.
And they thought would love the fact that they made Cleopatra black. However, it comes down to the fact that audiences don't care about the politics of the show if the show isn't good, and if the documentary isn't based on truth. And they know when you're using diversity as a marketing tactic and as a way to make money than actually for the good of what you're trying to do. They know you're not trying to be a good company. They know you're not actually trying to improve diversity in this world. You just thought it would make you a lot of money, and that clearly backfired, and now they're getting sued for $2 billion. And it's insane to me that a literal country can now sue a movie studio, and that really shows the state of where we're at right now and how many of these studios need to get back to focusing on quality of story. And Netflix are a studio that have done that, as you can see with the show One Piece, with Wednesday, with Stranger Things.
How is One Piece? I haven't seen this. I'm not familiar with it, but is it any good?
They have put out some incredible stories, and they seem to be putting story first as of late. However, some of their shows and some of their movies haven't been great, and that definitely is a problem that needs to be addressed. But what are your thoughts on this? Let me know down below in the comments. If you liked the video, please hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and I'll see you all on my next video.
It looks very quirky, doesn't it? But good video there. Yeah, I enjoyed that. I'd love to see a follow-up as to what happens with this. Being sued for $2 billion. Just how much that's really going to cost Netflix. So, you get what you deserve, Netflix.